So everybody, please continue to enjoy your lunch. We're going to get the program rolling here because we got a lot of material to cover, and we want to be respectful of your time. So at this time, Carl Adrian will join me as we recognize our outgoing board members who have served so faithfully over the past several years. So the first is Rich Cummins, who is the president of Columbia Basin College, served on the board from 2009 through 2014. Rich, thanks. And Tom Mackey, who was recently retired as the CFO of Agri Northwest. He served on the board from 2010 through 2014. Tom, thank you. And Kathy Balcom from Stevenson Advertising served on the board from 2003 to 2014. So we also have two board members that were unable to be here today to receive their recognition. Chuck Perkins from Arriva, who served on the board from 2011 through 2014. And David Lippis, who was formerly with Tylite, served on the board from 2009 through 2014. And I know he could not be here. So let's give all of our outgoing board members a round of applause and thanks for their great service. So now at this time, what I'd like to do is introduce the 2015 Board of TRIDEC. And if you'd stand when your name is called, I'd appreciate it. Remain standing until we've introduced everybody who's here. So serving on the executive committee is Jim Sanders, who's retired from Benton PUD. Jim, I know you're here. Brad Fisher, RBC Wealth Management. Fran Forget, attorney, Reddig, Osborne, and Forget. Roy Keck, Port of Benton. Jim Beaver, Benton County Commissioner. Craig Walker, legal counsel, Walker, Hay, and Meehan. Dave Zavell, Pasco City Manager. Maria Mosley, Kennewick City Manager. Carl Adrian, TRIDEC. And this executive committee is joined by board member Steve Ashby from PNNL, new to the board. Deborah Barnard, the Barnard Griffin Winery. Chad Bartram from Benton PUD. Ken Brutzman from Brutzman Office Solutions. John Chucci, CH2M Hill Plateau Remediation Company. Doc Hastings, retired congressman. Melanie Hoffer, Tri-Cities Business Journal and Senior Times. Bill Johnson, Mission Support Alliance. Todd Jones, Agri Northwest. Sandra Kent, Richland City Council. Jennifer Lenzi, Clifton Larson Allen CPAs. Bob Link, Arriva. Brandon Mayfield, Shervinell Construction. Keith Moo Young, WSU Tri-Cities. Dave Olson, Washington River Protection Solutions. Gene Reichman, Port of Pasco Commissioner. Kevin Smith, DOE Office of River Protection. Chris Watkins, Visit Tri-Cities. Steve Young, Mayor of the City of Kennewick. Please join me in thanking all of our board members for their willingness to serve and their commitment to this great organization. So now it's my pleasure to introduce the President and CEO of TRIDEC, Carl Adrian, who's going to give us a brief recap of the activities of 2014. Carl.
Good afternoon. And again, welcome. I'm glad you all could be here today. Also a special thanks to our sponsors and special thanks to our members because without your support, as Mike said earlier, we couldn't do the things we do in this community. You'll find a copy of TRIDEC's 2014 annual report at your table, and it describes our activities during the past year in much more detail than I can in the few minutes I have here today. In the first speech I gave as TRIDEC president, I tried to drive home three concepts which form the basis of my philosophy on economic development. As I reflected on 2014, they are as true today in everything we do as they were then. The first was economic development is a team sport. And whether it's responding to a business looking for a new location, helping a local business expand, or lobbying Congress for additional cleanup funds or for PNNL funding, TRIDEC often leads, but we never do it alone. We rarely act alone. The second was economic development is a process, not an event. Whether it's Trader Joe's or General Motors or whatever your dream business is, even if it comes, and when it comes, economic development isn't over. You know the old adage, if you're not moving forward or if you're not growing, you're really dying on the vine. And the third concept was economic development is everybody's business. You can't just leave it to us and our partners. We can help facilitate job creation, capital investment. We can help make recommendations to make this an attractive community and a business climate. But it really is you, the private sector, that hire the people, make the investment. And I can't emphasize more what we all do and say about the Tri-Cities certainly influences our future, and we'll come back and influence what happens here. The new Tri-City community brand was built on a partnership. TRIDEC, Visit Tri-Cities, and the Regional Chamber of Commerce joined together. We introduced it in last fall, and if the brand is successful, and it does set the Tri-Cities apart from our competition, it will take more than the 3 organizations to make that happen. It's going to take all of you. Our business recruitment efforts have always been a team effort with partners in the cities, the ports, the state, and oftentimes institutions like CBC and WSU Tri-Cities. Last year, we responded to over 800 business inquiries, ranging from just a simple question or two to 35-page questionnaires. We hosted 15 site visits, and almost always we involved our partners, local business, or government leaders. Our partners helped us staff trade show booths at Data Center World and PowerGen. In all, we were out of state 9 times marketing the Tri-Cities to companies, site location consultants, or airlines. We helped new companies like Preferred Freezer in Richland through some state regulatory issues. And we helped small businesses like Carbitex expand their local operations. With help from the state and the state legislature, and I'll say here especially Senator Sharon Brown, we completed a study on the suitability of Hanford or Energy Northwest for the location of a small modular reactor. Thanks to our contractor, URS, now AECOM, we found a $300 million to $450 million cost advantage on a site at Energy Northwest. We have met and we will continue to meet with SMR vendors, the Department of Energy, the NRC, and others to make sure they're aware of the advantages of the Tri-Cities location. And we want the Tri-Cities to become the center of this new industry. That is the end game here. In 2014, we made a conscious effort to focus our business retention and expansion program on the food and beverage industry, not at the exclusion of other manufacturers, but because food and beverage represent 45% of the manufacturers in Benton and Franklin counties. We're calling this new program FBREO, Food and Beverage Retention and Expansion Opportunities. It's the Tri-Cities, we had to have an acronym, right? After interviewing 71 local companies, reoccurring themes emerged. The need for a hospitality program, the need for a culinary school, the need for food processing training, and an event to showcase our local companies and their capabilities. I'm not sure the expansion at WSU, or the expansion of WSU's hospitality program to the Tri-Cities was based on our survey, but it was sure a nice coincidence because that program is expanding here on the Tri-City campus. TRIDEC will be putting together the first, putting on the first FBREO Expo in June, showcasing local food and beverage companies. And we're going to continue to work with others to address outstanding needs in the industry. TRIDEC supported PNNL budget requests in a variety of programs last year, including non-proliferation, cyber and homeland security, and others. Our annual congressional letter of request included an ask for $121 million of additional cleanup for Hanford. The omnibus spending package that was passed by Congress included $93 million over the administration's budget. We ask our lobbyist, K.L. Gates, to review some history about our letter of request to Congress and what our success rate has been. And between fiscal year 10 and 15, we had a 60% success rate, or approximately $239 million of additional funding. Between fiscal 01 and 15, the success rate went up to 81%, and that netted about nearly $100 million a year of additional money on the average. Christmas came early in December in 2014 when the President signed the Defense Authorization Act, which contained 5 items of importance to the TRIDEC and the community. The Manhattan Project National Historical Park. We had 14, I think, National Park representatives here last week, along with DOE headquarters representatives doing a site visit, their first site visit, and at least the report we've gotten back is they were impressed, to say the least. Limited public access to Rattlesnake Mountain, which has been something the community's asked for a long time, and I know kind of a pet for Doc that wanted to get that done. And then also conveyance of 1,641 acres of Hanford land for economic development by September 30th of this year. And then two funding authorizations totaling $49 million for additional Hanford cleanup. 2014 was a busy and successful year for us. And I'm going to end where I started and just remind you, economic development is everybody's business. None of this could have happened or would have happened without the work of many here in the community and elsewhere. I do have to recognize, though, that on the federal issues in particular, the importance of our delegation, Senators Murray and Cantwell and Representative Hastings until at least the end of 2014, and going forward, Congressman Newhouse, on issues like the national park, they carried the load. It wasn't the Tennessee delegation, it wasn't the New Mexico delegation that got that bill passed, it was the Washington delegation. And had it not been for Doc's strategy on how to get the bill passed, I think we still would not have a national park and those other issues. Does anybody remember number 2? Number 1 was economic development as a team sport. All right, economic development is a process, not an event. You know, I think we have to step back and say this community has not even begun. We've got a lot to do, and we're going to move forward and continue to move forward. And finally, economic development is everybody's business. And that means everybody in this audience, everybody in this room, and everybody in the community. It's very important that we all get engaged in the economic development process. I want to thank you all for coming, and thank you very much for being here. And I'd like to take a minute at this time and just recognize the TRIDEC team that's here with us today. I'm going to ask the staff to stand at least, and maybe we could hold applause. But Gary Peterson, Vice President of Federal Programs, most of them are going to be way in the back there. Bryson Bailey, our Director of Site Selection Services. Gary White, Business Retention and Expansion. Tracy Jow, Project Manager. Tracy's over working the slides. Kayla Pratt, our Director of Communications and Member Services. Laura Warr, Finance, is down here. Betty Compton, Bookkeeper. Sue Ann Burton, our Receptionist. And of course, Jane Foreman, Executive Assistant/boss, is here. I also am going to recognize my wife, Rita, who came today. You know, and Rita has probably been into, I'm going to say at least 100 events like this in my career. And I was really surprised at how easy it was to get her to agree to come today. So Rita, thank you for being here. We also lost a member of the team this year. Harold Heacock passed away in December, and Harold had been our longtime representative on the Hanford Advisory Board, and we'll miss Harold. At the same time, I'd like to also, though, recognize Don Boucher. Don has replaced Harold on the Hanford Advisory Board, and it's a thankless job, Don, and so we really appreciate the fact that you're doing that. Finally, 3 more I'd like to recognize. One is Bruce Davis with the Small Business Development Center. We provide office space to the SBDC. And a second, Simon Mailer with SCORE, the Service Corps of Retired Executives. And these 2 offices kind of fill a gap in some of TRIDEC's services by creating a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs and small business. And then finally, I think we have Rebecca Weber with us today, and Rebecca is an international trade specialist with the Washington Department of Agriculture and also has an office. One more thing. Finally, I have to thank TRIDEC Board of Directors for their commitment and willingness to dedicate the time to our activities. I can't think of a time that I haven't asked a board member to do something, meet with a new business prospect, or come to dinner to help entertain somebody that I've gotten turned down. So I really appreciate the board and their commitment to all that we do at TRIDEC. So thank you very much.
So at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, who happens to be my replacement as lab director at PNNL. And you might wonder how this came together so quickly. Well, Carl called me as we were beginning to plan this event and said, "You think we could get the new lab director to be our keynote speaker?" And I was not part of the selection process. I knew it was going on. And I said, "Well, I probably have a little bit of influence here. I can probably help you out, Carl." So ultimately, Steve Ashby went through a very competitive process and was selected. And after I said congratulations, I said, "And by the way, I've committed you to," and I didn't know it was going to be Steve at the time we'd made this commitment, but I said, "I've committed you to about a 35-minute speech on April the 20th, so clear your calendar and hold that date." I still had a little influence over him at that time, you see. And so anyway, it's great to have Steve here. He was selected, as I said, through a very competitive process that Patel ran. It was a national search. He's going to share with you his compelling vision for the future of the laboratory. And I gave him a little bit of advice before I left. I left 3 envelopes in my desk, and I said, "Steve, these are for when you have a bad day. The first bad day, you open up the first envelope, and it says, well, blame your predecessor." So blame me, right? The second envelope, when you have your second bad day, it says what any good manager would do, reorganize. And then when you have your third bad day, it says make 3 envelopes. Anyway, Steve's not going to need those 3 envelopes. I know that. But, you know, this community has been so supportive of the laboratory, so supportive of the directors, it was so supportive of me. We've got a tremendous partnership between the laboratory and the community. And I would ask you all to give Steve the same level of support you provided me and the past directors over the past 50 years. Steve.
All right, well, is this on? All right, so first I'd like to thank TRIDEC, Mike and Carl, for the invitation to speak to you today, but also take the opportunity to thank Mike Kloos for all that he's done for the laboratory, for this community, and our nation. So I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking Mike for his tenure as laboratory director. So I was informed, not asked, whether I'd be willing to give these remarks today, and it'll be 3 weeks this week that I'll be have had the pleasure to be the laboratory's director, and so I'd like to share a few of my thoughts. I am very honored to have been selected, and I sincerely hope I won't need any envelopes anytime soon, especially after today's event, in which case I will definitely blame Mike Kloos. So I know that I have some very big shoes to fill. And if you think about it, though, we all should be very optimistic about the future, not just the Tri-Cities and the region, but also the laboratory. And I know many people here are quite familiar with the laboratory, know what we've done, and I'd like just to share a little bit more about that. Under Mike's leadership, if you haven't tracked it, we have emerged as one of the, if not the best performing national laboratory in the system that DOE runs. And the system has really been tremendously successful over a very long period of time, which actually goes well beyond our 50-year history. And I think the nation should be proud of the DOE complex, the national laboratories, and all that we do each and every day for our citizens. This laboratory in particular has had quite a track record of accomplishment and success. And I'm committed to taking PNNL to the next level of excellence in the science and technology that we deliver to our various sponsors, in the operations in which we conduct that research responsibly here in the Tri-Cities primarily, and also in our community engagement. Because we recognize that really it's through the support of the community that we've been as successful as we have been for 50 years. And I want to thank the community for your support of this laboratory, past and future. And I know that as we continue to thrive, this will continue to be a national treasure and a community resource. Now, in my view, as we want to go to that next level of excellence, it'll be important for us to continue to elevate both the quality and the impact of our science and technology across the range of the programs that we run on behalf of the country. And so what I'd like to tell you a little bit about is my vision for moving PNNL towards that next level, and a framework we've developed for defining our programs and the research programs of the future. And I'd also like to point out how I see TRIDEC and the community being partners in that success, especially as it relates to economic development. So let me ask the question, when you first think about our world-class research institutions throughout the world, and you think about what are the big name institutions, most people will think about the leading research universities, such as Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, etc. Usually won't think about a Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, or frankly, any of the national laboratories, despite all that we've done for the country over what's almost 7 decades now as a system. And if you look at that, that's one of the things I'd like to change. Is I like the system, but in particular Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, to be more widely recognized as a world-class scientific research institution. And that is my aspiration as director, is to really develop that culture that we need at the laboratory, to attract the talent and continue to get the great people, scientists and engineers and support professionals that will make that happen, make this an institution that can deliver even more for our community and our nation. I have a larger aspiration, which is in so doing and working with the local universities and others, we can also raise the stature and gain greater recognition for this region, for the Northwest, that will allow us to be seen as the intellectual powerhouse that we are and can even be greater known for. So the question is, why is this important, especially in the context of TRIDEC? So if you look at a map of the U.S. and you think about where a lot of the high-tech jobs get clustered, several regions around the country come to mind. We can see over here we've got the Boston 128 corridor, the Research Triangle in North Carolina, and of course, perhaps best known, Silicon Valley down in the Bay Area. And if you ask what do they have in common, certain features to it, and we actually see that here in the Northwest, we're starting to see some of those features accumulate, especially over in Seattle. And what do they have in common? Well, let's take a closer look. If you zoom in on these areas, and you look at those, the 4 I've mentioned, particularly the first 3, what do you see? World-class research institutions have anchored the attraction and incubation of high-tech industry. There's actually interesting studies done on this and how it's come about, and the story varies, but the correlation is undeniable. And we can see here in the Northwest, we see the beginnings of that story around UW and what's going on with some of the industries there on the west side. And so I asked the question, how do we leverage the research institutions we have here in WSU and PNNL to similarly attract high-tech industry to Eastern Washington? And so that's why I think this is important for this audience and what we'll be looking at, and how we can leverage what is about $1 billion worth of federal and other R&D done at the laboratory each and every year. So towards that, then we plan to build on that strong foundation success that Mike Cluse has laid for us over his 8 years as lab director to develop and enhance our reputation as a world-class research institution. And so if you look at what we're known for and the capabilities we'll be building upon here, right now, we are widely known as DOE's premier national laboratory in chemistry, environmental sciences, and data analytics. There's a host of other expertises that we have, capabilities, the people, the equipment, and the facilities that we provide, but these are 3 for which we're especially well known. And we leverage those capabilities for a variety of programs at the laboratory, as well as make them available to local industry through our technology assistance program. Now, if you look at that, we've leveraged these foundational capabilities to provide truly national leadership in several areas, most notably the 4 shown here. In nonproliferation, in which we really help the nation to understand what potential adversaries are up to with respect to the development and spread of nuclear weapons that could endanger our country and the world. We are the #1 non-proliferation laboratory for the Department of Energy, providing advice and assistance to all levels of government to advise our policymakers on what they need to know about the technical capabilities of other countries. And we have a lot of expertise there, and I'll say more some examples. If you look at it also then, a lot of the same underlying capabilities, understanding radionuclides, allows us to meet our commitment to clean up the Cold War legacy here through remediation of the site. And the continuing expertise we provide, not just to Hanford, but also to the problems at WIP. And so we have quite a bit of expertise and world-leading expertise at that in remediation technologies. In climate science, understanding what's happening to our planet, what's happening to the climate, and the scientific processes going into that. Again, we have the largest single contingent of climate scientists and engineers working in this area to understand those processes and what we can do to perhaps mitigate or adapt to potential changes in our climate. And then finally, within the energy space, we're the leader in the electric grid of the future. Not just making it happen, but envisioning it and then making it happen. And I'll say more about that as well. So these are 4 areas in which you just look at our rate of publication, you look at the plenary lectures we're giving in scientific communities, you look at the engagements we have with other universities, labs, and industry. You look at the output, and the recognition we gain is undisputable that the Tri-Cities is providing national, in some cases global leadership in these 4 areas, leveraging the great wealth of expertise we have at the lab. So what about the future? So we've developed a science vision which encompasses much of what we do and helps distinguish the laboratory from other labs in the system and from many other research performers. And that vision is that we want to be able to understand, predict, and control the behavior of complex adaptive systems. Now that's a mouthful. What is a complex adaptive system? Well, we give 3 examples here. The Earth and the climate is a complex adaptive system. We want to understand that as it goes forward. And so that leads us into our expertise around subsurface processes, perhaps for cleanup activities, or for atmospheric processes for understanding climate science. The second one is around the energy system. And here what we can do in understanding the grid, understanding energy storage, and I'll say more about that momentarily, how the pieces interplay to deliver us the kind of reliable energy system that we count on to drive our economic prosperity and our security. And finally, on security, the security system itself, what we can do to make sure that we can detect and prevent the importation of dangerous materials to this country and to our allies. And so that, again, relies on a lot of the expertise we have, what we can do to design those systems, working with the sponsoring agencies to not just do the underlying research, but develop technology that are deployed around the world to keep us safe. And we see those at various border crossings to look for radioactive materials coming in, and almost every day when you go through an airport. Now, everyone here knows the PNNL salute. PNNL salute. All right, keeping you safe at the airports. All right. So what I'd like to do now is go through each of these examples a little bit and talk about what we're doing in the security realm. Here, as I said, we are a leader in nonproliferation and the technologies that are used to verify the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, make sure that people are abiding by its terms. In November and December of last year, more than 200 technical experts from 40 countries gathered in the Dead Sea area of Jordan, who was the largest and most technologically advanced full-scale inspection exercises that was carried out in partnership with colleagues from around the world. PNNL was central to those exercises. We had a number of staff there. You can see one of the pictures from the exercise here. Some of our staff are depicted in that. And again, so when you think about PNNL, you think about what we're doing, you know we're based here. We're also present around the world working with colleagues to keep the planet safe. We demonstrated measurement and characterization techniques that can detect short-lived radionuclides that are typically found after a nuclear explosion. And this technology can help us produce the smoking gun that would indicate a violation of the treaty. The same technology and expertise were also called upon after the Fukushima accident in Japan a couple of years back, in which our capabilities were able to detect the radionuclides, and our scientists were able to do the analysis that informed the Japanese and U.S. governments that indeed a partial meltdown was in progress. After providing that assistance, fast forward, now relying on that remediation expertise we have, we've lent colleagues to our friends in Japan to help them deal with the aftermath of that horrible disaster. If we move to the climate system here, we're focused on understanding the climate system, and in particular the carbon cycle and its role in climate change. In particular, one of the things we've been focusing on is understanding the roles of microbes in that ecosystem, and in particular the permafrost. And what we'd like to understand is how frozen carbon that right now is captured in that permafrost and not being released in the atmosphere where it can do bad things, how that will behave over time and how it might get converted into greenhouse gases such as methane, which the microbes facilitate. And at present, to understand the magnitude of why this question is important, is estimated there are about 1 trillion tons of carbon trapped in the permafrost. But as the Arctic warms, gigatons of carbon may be released from the Arctic tundra and transformed into those greenhouse gases by the microbial actions going on in the soil. And so we want to understand how those microbes behave, how they live in this kind of environment. And so we're doing some groundbreaking research in that area, leveraging our microbial biology expertise and data analytics. And a study of ours, which recently appeared in Nature, and in fact was highlighted in a Science Friday segment just a couple of weeks ago, talks about some of the work we're doing in that area in collaboration with others. And then finally, if we look at the energy system, and I'll tell you what you're seeing here in a second, it is not a bug, it is a battery actually, or part of a battery. We are leaders in the grid writ large, but also in energy storage. And that's important because we understand how we can maintain this energy system, especially the production of energy from all the above sources, and do it in a responsible way vis-a-vis the Earth system I just talked about. And so what we're looking at here is we want to think about how can we bring on new sources of energy, such as renewables. A key part of that is they're intermittent. And so what you want to be able to do here then is store the energy that's produced when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing in essentially very large-scale batteries, grid-scale batteries. And we're partnering with many others and looking at this. And the key challenge here is we all like to have higher density, energy density, and better cycle times in those batteries. The same challenge we have in our cell phones. You like a battery that lasts longer, didn't lose its ability to keep a charge over time. We want to be able to do that, but now imagine batteries that are a wee bit bigger than your cell phone that are really used for grid storage, grid-level storage. Now, to enable this, we've been leveraging our fundamental science capabilities, particularly in chemistry and catalysis, as well as the tools we've created for chemical imaging. You're sort of seeing that here, where we can use things like nuclear magnetic resonancing capabilities and computing, as well as transmission electron microscopy, all based in the Environmental Molecular Sciences Laboratory, or EMSL, on our campus, to really look at how a battery is operating during its operation, in operando. And here what you're seeing is we can actually look at how sodium ions are being deposited onto a tin oxide cathode within the battery, and how that leads to nanoscale failure modes within that. This will help us to understand how to design better batteries for those grid-scale operations as well as for transportation purposes. Now, I've given you just a few examples of what we're doing in this area where we'll continue to go forward. And we do not do it alone. Partnership is key to our success. We partner with academia in the basic research, with other national laboratories and applied work we're doing, and with industry in getting those research results out of our laboratory and in the commercial marketplace where appropriate. We're very proud of our ability to partner effectively because one institution cannot solve the problems that are really challenging this nation. And my view is that if a single institution thinks it can solve those problems, it's either not thinking big enough or really not working on the right problems that are worthy of a national laboratory. It's also important to see what we can do to get those research results out, to amplify their impact by getting into the commercial sector where we can create jobs and wealth for Americans. And so here we're very proud of the track record we've had over our 50-year history, where we can track our people and technology have been essential to more than 150 companies that can trace their roots to PNNL. And we're looking at expanding that in partnership with TRIDEC. Now going forward, what we'd like to do is see if we can leverage some of the very large programs we have at the laboratory to attract more industrial players to this region to partner with us. Now, an example of this is what we've done in the Pacific Northwest Smart Grid Demonstration Project. And in fact, on the very first day of the job for me, on April 1st, out in Spokane with Senator Cantwell and Congresswoman Morris Rogers, celebrating the near completion of this demonstration project. It was 5 years, $178 million. It was led by Battelle at the request of the participants. It engaged 5 utilities, a number of vendors, and both our research universities. And it's been widely hailed as a success, not just in bringing those disparate players together, but for the technological advances that they were able to deploy, understanding what we can do to really design the future power grid that's going to be needed to operate our energy system going forward, to reduce capital expenditures, to ensure a more reliable and resilient grid in the future. And so we see a lot of people here partnering, and they all know who we are in the Tri-Cities and what we bring to the table in this regard. So what I'd like to do is to build on that project and work with these partners to go forward in those activities. And so we're looking at that. Now, to facilitate that, we're also continuing to renew and invest in the campus. And here's one of the latest items we'll be looking at commissioning later this summer. It is our systems engineering laboratory being constructed out on Horn Rapids. And this is where we'll do a lot of our energy-related R&D, in particular in power engineering. This is where our electricity infrastructure operations center will be moved, and as well as our building operations center. But not only will our scientists and their collaborators do research in here, but we see this as a means by which we can attract industry into the laboratory and into the community to work with us on collaborative R&D. And once we've got them here, we'd like to talk about the possibility of them perhaps creating a presence in the region and perhaps the Tri-City. So this is a partnership we'd like to build, and if we look at it, going forward, what we see here is that the laboratory, we have considerable science and technology expertise, some unique facilities, tremendous asset in the scientists, engineers, and support professionals, the 4,300 of them who do amazing things each and every day. Our industry partners are going to bring the access to market and the commercial need, the problems that we have to help them solve. And we'd like to work with TRIDEC, bring them to the table to look at what we can do in terms of land and buildings, investor networks, etc. All to make that happen, not only to further the missions of the laboratory, but in so doing to create opportunity here in the Tri-Cities and the region. So together, we believe that we can actually make the Tri-Cities a bolder, brighter, and better place. And PNNL is proud to be here. We thank you all for your support over the years. Thank you very much.